So let's start with our first group, Homo habilis, or handyman. This group came after Lucy, and as you can see in the picture here, which may look familiar, this shows some things that social scientists discovered about Homo habilis, or handyman. Firstly, they found that they had tools to skin the zebra and cut the meat. So they realized that they had tools, hence the name handyman. Notice that they are not dressed, so they had no clothes. And also notice that they lived in very small groups. They didn't really interact with each other, so basically they were always just trying to make sure that their basic needs were met. So the name came from the fact that this group of hominids lived in very small groups and was not clothed, but they used their hands to help them survive. Hence, handyman. So some facts about handyman. The tools that they used were very simple, so as you can see them cutting the zebra there, it's not a very sophisticated tool that they used to help them skin the animal or cut the meat. Instead, they used bones and sticks for digging and sometimes sharp objects, like they would cut the pieces of sharp rocks off the top of a stone so that they could use it for cutting. They could use this to also trap small animals or cut meat, but that's about it. So this is our group, Homo habilis, or handyman. Okay, moving on to our next group, Homo erectus, or upright man. You can see something very important in this picture, and that is the fact that they had fire, clothing, and they even had some tools they used to cook in the fire. You can see over here that they are cutting meat and skinning an animal, and you can see that they lived in a little bit of a larger group than the early hominids did. Even though it was a little larger, it's still somewhat of a small community. Again, they got their name from the fact that they stood upright and tall, the first group to do this, hence the name upright man. Upright man was discovered by a man named Eugene Dubois. They were the first group of humans to stand upright, again, as I mentioned, so the name was upright man, and their remains were found in Asia and Europe, which told us that they left their homes and walked to other locations to find food and shelter. They were the first hominids to migrate out of Africa. They were taller and thinner than the early hominids, but they were not as tall as humans today, although some were. Their bones were very strong, and this helped them walk and run to where they needed to get. Again, they migrated pretty far. They had more rounded, smooth foreheads than the earlier group, but they had a large ridge above their forehead, and their jaw stuck out a lot, so they still look quite different from us. They were tool makers, and they made things a little bit more complex, like stronger axes and cutting tools than the earlier hominids. Their biggest accomplishment was the fact that they used fire. Animal bones were found in some places. This is their remains, which told social scientists that they may have been cooking their food. Again, that's an interpretation by social scientists, but it's quite a good inference, imagining that they found animal bones near the bones of our ancestors. All these capabilities helped them travel far and survive longer than hominids before them. They built stronger shelters, and so they could stay in one place longer and survive for a long period of time. And again, most importantly, they had fire, which helped them stay warm, cook their food, and protect themselves. Next, we have Homo sapien Neanderthals, or Neanderthal man. As you can see here, they are dressed a little bit fancier. You can see that they're wearing animal furs instead of some just basic pieces of nature. Also, they are holding flowers here near someone who is either sick or dying. So what this tells us, and what social scientists believe, is that they may have been helping the sick or burying the dead, somewhat like a ritual, and you know what that means now. So this tells us that they lived in a community together. And also they had fire, and the people in the cave, it looks like they're a little bit of a larger group than our last hominids. So for this group, the biggest thing is to remember is that they lived in communities. Again, this is the fourth group, and the part of a group that we belong to. Their remains were found in Africa as well as Europe and Asia, which means they also migrated. Like the groups before them, they walked upright, but they were shorter and stockier than us today. Their brains were larger than the earlier groups, which helped them develop more advanced skills and tools. They learned how to make sharp blades from breaking rocks, and they used that to help them cut things. The most important thing about them is they had a sense of community. If a member died, they built burial mounds for them. They also hunted as a group, which helped them get more food, so they were able to feed more people. This helped them have more children, and so they survived longer. So all of this evidence shows us that they took care of each other, including people that were injured. There was evidence that they healed broken bones, or somehow either just took care of each other, whether it be with medicine or just taking care of each other and standing by until that person healed. So for our Neanderthal man, the biggest thing to remember is that they lived in a true community. And last but not least, we have Homo sapiens sapiens, or doubly wise man. As you can see, this group was the group that painted on the caves. They were fully dressed, they used fire for light, minerals for paintings, and they even stood on scaffolding, again, to make sure that they could reach those high places. Their brain was large, but their teeth were smaller. This was because they had fire, so they could cook their meat, and they didn't really need those big teeth. This didn't happen right away, it happened over a period of time. They also started to develop more complex tools, specifically ones that helped them kill animals from a farther distance. So, if you could kill an animal from a farther distance, chances are you're probably going to survive. This helped them, again, live longer than some of the others. They made tools to help them catch fish, and again, left paintings on walls of their caves to share stories about their hunts and entertain themselves. They even created musical instruments. They had more time in their hands to do this because hunting was a lot easier as a result of their advanced tools and the fact that they actually survived a majority of their hunts, being farther away from the animal that they were trying to kill. So now that you have an idea of all of the groups, let's take a look at the hominid brains and how they developed over time. You can see Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and Homo sapiens. Okay. While the size of their brains grew over time, you can see that the tools they used also advanced. So this shows you that each group of hominids progressed farther than the group before them, which helped them, and each group lasts longer than the group that came before them. So we just took a look at all of the hominid groups from our early ancestors. As you can see here are some of the main ideas we talked about. There are 5 hominid groups, the first starting with Lucy, the earliest hominid group that we know of, who was found in Africa, and then the groups that came after her, handyman and upright man, Homo habilis, again being handyman, and Homo erectus being upright man. They were found to have migrated to other places outside of Africa, including Asia and Europe. They stood straight, they had the ability to make tools and fire and shelters, and then came Neanderthal man and doubly wise man, which is the group that we belong to, Homo sapiens. They have larger brains, more complex tools, and they lived in communities. So, that's a brief overview of the hominid groups. We're going to talk more about this in class over the coming days. I hope you have a better understanding of where we came from and why it's important for social scientists to share their interpretations based on their findings. Thanks for doing your homework. See you tomorrow in class.